Well, the scandal of the century is now unfolding. I'm talking about Joe Biden's cognitive disabilities and the auto pen scandal. Now, before you move on, I've got so much new information to share with you regarding this scandal. In fact, Justice Knight and myself both put out a similar report because of the importance of this video. I've got new names I'm going to be throwing out, who was really in charge, because the bottom line here is Congress did not do their job. They should have implemented the 25th Amendment years ago under Joe Biden, but instead somebody else was calling the shots. And we really need to know who the hell was president under Joe Biden, because it sure the hell wasn't him. I've got lots of information to show you today, and you guys are going to be floored. But summons are flying out right now. The GOP is finally starting to get active on this thing, and they have called, I believe, 5 people, summoned 5 separate people to get some investigations on this entire thing. And the question is, was there a crime committed? And by the way, it's not a crime at all to use the auto pen. Obama was the first one, I believe, to use the auto pen, and I believe Donald Trump did too. The crime therein lies in the fact that it is only illegal to use the auto pen if you are incompetent, right? We've got stuff with Joe Biden where he used the auto pen when he was not even in office. He was out golfing. So this is some pretty hardcore information, and there's one person in particular who is surrounded by that. But let's start first with the fact that Donald Trump has been calling out this scandal.
Who was operating the auto pen? This is a very serious thing. We had a president that didn't sign anything. He auto-penned almost everything. He opened the borders of the United States of America. And I kept saying, who would do such a thing? Allowing criminals to pour in from all over the world, not just South America, all over the world. They came in from Africa, they came in from Asia, they came from the Congo. The prisons in the Congo in Africa, these are rough people. The prisons from the Congo are empty. You know where they are? They're in this country. Who would sign this? Nobody would sign it. No sane person would sign it. You know who signed it? Radical left lunatics that were running our country, and the auto pen signed it. And they didn't want him, and they were disappointed in getting him because they wanted Bernie Sanders. And then after about 2 weeks, they said, wait a minute, this is a gift. He'll do anything. We're going to use the auto pen. And they use the auto pen in everything.
Thank God we now have a president who is cognitively there and calling out the crap that happened under the Biden administration. In fact, in a Truth Social post that Donald Trump put out back in early May, so May 20th, just a few days ago, he called this treasonous. Here's what he said, and I underline the important part. It was the people that knew he was cognitively impaired and that took over the auto pen. He goes, they stole the presidency of the U.S. and put it in great danger. This is treason at the highest level. So Donald Trump is saying here, hey, these people could have committed treason. Now, I don't know if it's worthy of treason. I'm going to get into a view on that a little later. However, these people knew dang well that he was incapable and were calling the shots. In fact, I've got information to show you today where our leaders are claiming that his administration or people in his staff may have even been paid to, well, do some of the pardons that they did. But before I dive into that, just a quick break from my sponsor. If you're a dog owner like me, then you're already aware that, well, a dog's health can be complicated. In fact, sometimes it's hard to separate what is a healthy dog from an unhealthy dog. Well, Dr. Marty Goldstein, one of America's top holistic veterinarians, says there is one potentially dangerous substance which is found in many of your dog foods. In fact, you should stop feeding it to your dog immediately. The sad truth is that many dog food manufacturers have this substance in their dog food, and it's one of the most dangerous substances that your dog can have. And no surprise, most of the mainstream media is ignoring it. In fact, Dr. Marty, after years of research, has released an exclusive video for free to the public, by the way, and it's a video that's uninterrupted, and it showcases exactly what foods you should stop feeding your dog. And to check it out, all you have to do is go to healthydog1.com healthydog.com/haven. That's healthydog, the number one.com/haven. And just by making this one change to your dog, you can help support his overall health. So check it out today. I'm a dog lover. You are not going to want to miss this one. If you want more information, click that more button if you're on your cell phone, or click the link in the description box below. So regarding the AutoPen scandal, the good news is that our GOP is now looking into it. In fact, James Comer came on Fox News and had this to say.
Joe Biden wasn't capable of making decisions. He wasn't coherent. We think we've identified who the staffers are. Jason, you all have done great work with that over at Heritage Oversight. We're going to bring everyone that we believe was involved in any role in the use of the AutoPen. We're going to invite them to come in for a transcribed interview. If they want, then they will receive a subpoena and they will have a full-blown deposition. But we want to find out who was actually making the decisions in the White House during the last 9 months of the Biden administration when he was clearly in mental decline.
So that's the good news. They are finally looking into this scandal. Now, James Comer did not make any names or state any names in that particular interview. However, there are some names going around, but let me start first with this New York Post article here. And its headline, Biden sources suspect key aide may have abused AutoPen as Trump's far more restrictive signing rules are revealed. And by the way, before I even get in the names, Donald Trump and others have had more restrictions on the AutoPen than Joe Biden, just saying. But kind of back to who they think it might be, and many of the articles are suspecting Joe Biden aides. It says, one Biden White House source told the Post they suspect that a key aide to the then president may have made unilateral determinations on what to auto-sign. The Post is not publishing the staffer's name due to the lack of concrete evidence and refutations by other colleagues. The Biden aide, who did not respond to requests for comment, would frequently make mention of what the boss wanted, the source said, but compatriots would have no idea if it was true because the internal culture was to not ask the question. In other words, whoever the New York Post is talking about here, and they're not stating names, but whoever it is, would say the boss said it. But there was no way for the aides to confirm that Joe Biden actually said what he said. Now, that alone is the biggest scandal of the century, because the question therein lies, was Joe Biden even in charge? And I think everybody and their mama knows damn well that he wasn't. But anyway, PJ Media goes on to speculate a little bit further on who this person could be that the New York Times was referencing. And I have to say that I absolutely love their view on this. But PJ Media, is this the AutoPen aide who abused Joe Biden's AutoPen? And here's what it says. It says speculation is swirling around Nir Tanden, a longtime left-wing operative. Tanden was Biden's controversial pick to lead the Office of Management and Budget until her nomination collapsed over a slew of hyper-partisan attacks on Republican lawmakers. She later found a role as White House staff secretary. Now she finds herself at the center of a constitutional crisis. And here's why, right? It says the timeline is damning. On December 30th, 2022, while Joe Biden was allegedly golfing in St. Crux, 6 pardons magically appear with his signature. Interesting, Miss Nir Tanden, right? You were in charge at the White House. You know, you were the White House staff secretary when Joe Biden was away. So this happened under your watch. Were you the one who used the AutoPen while Joe Biden was golfing? In fact, Oversight Project called her out. Here's Nir Tanden right there. And it says you were White House staff secretary when Biden AutoPenned pardons from the golf course in USVI. Is this you? She got completely called out. Now, she's also kind of under the radar, threatening to take it to court. sue, if you will, because here's her response to Stephen Anderson. And Stephen Anderson shared Donald Trump's post regarding the pardons and saying how they're void because of the auto pen. And Stephen Anderson is kind of commenting in that. Well, Neera Tanden steps in and she says, more importantly, does this mean that everything with a Trump auto pen signature is void in this administration and the last? Because there's a lot of auto pens in every administration. Some enterprising lawyers may want to sue. Now, obviously, she's a little afraid about this auto pen scandal. But again, let me reiterate, the auto pen is not illegal. It is perfectly a legal thing for presidents to do if you are cognizant. That is the issue in question here, and I think that's what we really need to focus on. Now, speaking of Neera Tanden, right, she has a lot of ties to Miss Hillary Clinton, as I like to call her. Let's just go back to that reminder. And she seems to be all over this administration, right? Talking about Joe Biden, kind of got her hands in the pot. And here it is on GQ.com. Don't mess with Neera Tanden, Hillary's Twitter-loving, self-appointed Secretary of Defense. You can see the two there are close. And it goes on. And this is also, this is NPR. Who is Neera Tanden, Biden's most controversial cabinet pick? Well, Neera Tanden is CEO of the left-leaning Center for American Progress. She served in the Clinton administration, was a key player in her 2008 campaign, and went on to serve in the Obama administration, helping to craft the Affordable Care Act. And of course, she was also highly involved in Joe Biden and his administration as well. Now, names in the past have been thrown out there about who has been involved. We know, according to past reports that I put out, that Hillary Clinton was personally active with Joe Biden. She called the White House quite a bit and talked to I believe it was Joe Biden or others within the White House. Also, we have Obama's name thrown out there as actively involved and potentially the one who has been pulling the strings. But Neera Tanden has got not enough attention, and now her name is in the pot. Well, the good news is Congress is onto it, and they are now sending out a summons for her to respond. Take a look at this. This is huge. This was published May 22nd, 2025. Congress of the United States House of Representatives. And you could see Mr. Comer there, the chairman. And he says, Miss Neera Tanden, the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is investigating the role of former Biden White House officials in possibly usurping authority from the former President Joe Biden and the ramifications of the White House staff intent on hiding his rapidly worsening mental and physical faculties. While the committee has been investigating the issue for a year, newfound details regarding Joe Biden's obvious decline demand renewed scrutiny of White House personal actions and knowledge of relevant information over the course of the prior administration. The committee seeks to understand who made key decisions and exercised the powers of the executive branch during the Biden administration, right? And he goes, you were potentially involved in, and you should have knowledge of these decisions. So we request for your appearance, right? So here they are summoning her. The committee remains concerned that you, as both director of the DPC and staff secretary, were involved in running interference on behalf of the former president and perhaps performing duties exclusively reserved for the president of the United States. That's a pretty bold accusation, but they are summoning her, calling her up and saying, you need to give us some questions, because weren't you the Secretary of State while Joe Biden was golfing and some of these, or at least 6 pardons were signed when Joe Biden was busy? How does that happen? Right? Well, the good news is that's not all they are summoning. This came out recently. Biden doctor Neera Tanden among 5 summoned by House GOP after ex-president's prostate cancer diagnosis. So it's not just Neera Tanden that has been summoned. In fact, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, Anthony Burnell, Annie Tomasini, Ashley Williams, and Neera Tanden each received letters from the House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer Thursday demanding that they sit for transcribed interviews over the next month with committee members and staff, with subpoenas likely if they fail to do so. So they're calling up the doctor and the administrators around it, including Neera Tanden. But you know what? There's a whole nother can of worms you need to see that Ed Martin just dropped.
Now you come forward to this question broadly of the auto pen. Auto pen's completely obviously legal if you're competent. And there must be a trail that shows who was in charge of the auto pen. I know this exists. Like I worked for a governor. We had a system for an auto pen to be able to use it. And so right now we have unprecedented conduct, the pardons, unprecedented admissions, the books as well as the staffers. I had a whistleblower in my office 10 days ago, senior Democrat, saying, look, it was these three people that controlled access and they were making money off of it. I don't know if I believe it yet, but the point is, I think we have to get to the bottom of it for the American people and to protect the process. And that's what we're doing. And by the way, make it all the way to the bottom. It may not be criminal, but it certainly should be a scandal of the first order, maybe in human history or maybe American history. I sound like the president there, but in American history to have this kind of conduct.
So some high up Democrat has some inside information. And well, some of these pardons, it sounds like, according to him, it could be possible, maybe by this whistleblower, he still has to investigate, that people were accepting money for pardons. He actually names who the gatekeepers are.
2020. And who are the three people they said were doing it for money?
This is the one who's, let me say it carefully.
Yeah.
The gatekeepers, different characterization of who was using the access, but the gatekeepers were Klain and Anita Dunn and Bob Bauer. And those three were really dominant characters in the White House. Ricchetti a little bit, and obviously Jill, but I think that was the three. I was with this person, and I said, "What about Susan Rice? What about some of these others?" And they said, "No, these were the ones."
So Klain, Dunn, Bob Bauer, Jill Biden, even kind of throwing in there. He's got to look into this personally, but we're going to find out more and more information on that. Sick, right? What if people actually did take money for these pardons? Lucy, you have some explaining to do. And I really hope that this just isn't all talk and no blow again, because that seems to be the forte of the Republicans. I'd like to see some blowing action for once. Let's go after and use the law to go after whatever the law is, whatever crime they've committed. Let's actually go after them for those crimes. Anyhow, with all of that, I love you all. I'm Lisa Haven, signing out.